Numbers tell stories. In 14 years, one man helped establish over 20 chapters across 3 countries. 300 punk rock shows, countless back alley battles, and 1 FBI death threat warning shaped his path. Think about transformation. How does a special education teacher's son become a high-ranking member of one of America's most notorious motorcycle clubs?
I was a chapter president of the Mongols Motorcycle Club and a member of the Vagos Motorcycle Club.
What drives a man to navigate the delicate balance between 14 state territories, rival gangs, and federal investigations?
He was one of the highest ranking Mongols in the country and helped, was one of the original guys that kind of started to push the brand out to the Midwest. It didn't really get that much publicity in more recent years.
Statistics paint the picture. From a 1963 Vespa to a Harley Davidson, from Portland's underground punk scene to Australia's biker world. 2 minutes could mean life or death. 6 minutes separated him from his twin. 24 years led him to a crossroads, but this isn't just about numbers, it's about identity, brotherhood, survival.
Motorcycle clubs are pretty adamant to not be called gangs. We all came together for the love of motorcycles.
Justin Mooch's journey spans 4 decades, 3 distinct subcultures, and 2 lives, one in the shadows, one in the light.
The Mongols have a saying that's respect few, fear none. They don't have a lot of respect for the other clubs and they don't fear anybody.
By 2024, his impact reached thousands through mentoring programs, speaking engagements, and community initiatives. Ready to ride? This is more than a story about motorcycles and mayhem. It's about evolution, redemption, and the price of belonging. The question isn't whether you'll be changed by this journey, it's how deeply. Rain falls in Salem, Oregon.
Speaking of bad weather, you come from the Northeast area, right? Oregon area?
Yeah, Northwest, yeah.
Where it rains like crazy, right?
All the time, for sure.
The year is 1981, and in a middle-class Italian-American household, twin boys enter the world just 6 minutes apart. One of them named Justin Mooch.
Right, yeah, no, I grew up in Salem, Oregon. It's about an hour outside of Portland. Man, Oregon was cool. I think it's, everyone hears about Portland and they see all the stuff in the news, and I think that's a different city than it was when I grew up. It's pretty cool. It's an hour to the beach, an hour to the mountains. It's one of the most beautiful states you can be in. It rains a lot, and I think, living there for a long time, that gets a little tough.
Every Sunday, aromas of traditional family meals fill their home, while holidays burst with the warmth of celebration and togetherness.
I'm an Italian background, so every Sunday was family dinners and every holiday and birthdays and, big family stuff. So, I had a really good family upbringing. I'd say, middle class, kind of working class because it was all teachers and stuff. But, yeah, we were treated well.
Who shapes a rebel's heart?
Well, I grew up with an identical twin brother, so I think we were kind of in search for identity. And for whatever reason, we decided that violence was going to be that identity.
I started getting tattooed. I was 16. I'm 43 now. So it's been a long time. And I used to be able to sit, for hours. And now it's like hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm good, dog. I'm good. Let's move on.
For Justin, it wasn't his biological father whose absence left questions unanswered. Instead, it was his mother, a special education teacher, and his stepfather, an engineer, who provided stability while an internal storm brewed.
My whole family's pretty much school teachers. So my biological father was in prison most of my life. So my stepdad, he owned a franchise of 7-Up bottling company. So he's an engineer. So he built like bottling lines. So he was in a factory all the time. And then my mom was a special education teacher. And then my grandparents were both high school teachers. And then most of my family's either teachers or like sports coaches.
The 1990s approached, bringing with them the thunderous call of punk rock.
You spent a lot of your teenage years, your formative years, in the hardcore punk rock scene.
Have you ever felt the pulse of rebellion in your veins? Justin did.
So there was a real big community because we were all so tight-knit because of stuff like that, because we were working together. It just felt more like family because everyone knew each other there, essentially.
Right.
So it was really cool.
By the late 1990s, he and his twin brother immersed themselves in Portland's hardcore scene, where bands like Poison Idea and Defiance ruled the underground.
And then Portland had a pretty good scene. Poison Idea was really famous in the 80s, and they're from Portland, and then Defiance was a really big punk band. And so I'd start to go to a lot of local shows and support the local scene.
Picture this, a young man astride a rebuilt 1963 Vespa. diving headfirst into a world of sharp-dressed punks and anti-racist skinheads.
We started getting in that scene quite a bit, and we were like rebuilding old Vestas. My first one was in 1963. It was like a 150 with a little 180 kit on it. I thought it was fast. I got up to 80 miles an hour and realized doing that on an 8-inch wheel isn't fun at all.
Yeah, that's
But
sketchy.
it was a good time. But yeah, that was pretty big in our culture for sure.
Over 300 shows across the U.S. and Canada, including legendary venues like CBGB and Gilman Street. Violence became his shadow. Running with sharp skinheads against racial prejudice, Justin found himself in countless back alley battles against neo-Nazi gangs. These weren't simple scuffles. Each confrontation wrote another chapter in his evolving identity.
We grew up wrestling and boxing and stuff, but it really turned into, a lot of street fighting stuff. And we got heavy into the punk rock and anti-racist skinhead scene. So we spent a lot of time physically fighting with neo-Nazi skinheads, rival gangs, that type of thing. So, a lot of going to concerts, getting in big group fights, that back and forth of gang fighting and stuff like that.
By 2005, at age 24, something shifted. The mosh pits felt smaller, the fights less meaningful. What happens when rebellion needs a new direction? For Justin, the answer rumbled in on 2 wheels. His first Harley Davidson.
2005, I bought my first Harley.
The Outsiders, an old-school motorcycle club in Oregon, offered something different, something deeper.
So I hung around with a really old school club called the Outsiders. They'd been in Oregon since like the 60s. They were super old school. And I learned a ton from them as far as like history and motorcycle protocol. And it was so much difference, But these guys were like in their 50s and stuff. And I was 24, 25 years old.
Think about Crossroads. Justin stood at one in 2006 when Nevada's highways led him to the Vagos Motorcycle Club.
So I didn't get along. I got along with them great, but we didn't have anything like shared interest other than motorcycles. And once I think at first it was like, oh, it was a motorcycle club, so I was just enamored by it. And once the kind of shininess faded away, I realized, I looked around and I was like, man, these guys are all cool, but I don't have anything in common with these people. Like I wouldn't invite these guys to a barbecue or catch a movie or go to a show. And so I was just looking for something different. So I ended up moving to Nevada, and that's when I first met the Vagos.
Okay. The green machine.
Their green insignia beckoned, promising brotherhood and purpose. But this was just the beginning. Sometimes the first step isn't the final destination. Through it all, one question echoed. Who was Justin Mooch becoming? The punk scene had shaped him. Violence had hardened him. But something greater waited on the horizon. Like the twin he was born beside, Justin's identity remained split between what he was and what he could become. Change comes in colors. For Justin Mooch, it started with green, the distinctive shade of the Vagos Motorcycle Club that he joined in 2006. The numbers spoke volumes. 12 to 15 members, including Mooch, would soon make a decision that would reshape their lives. Why leave something familiar? By 2007, cracks appeared in the Vagos Foundation, at least for Mooch. Something bigger called to him. The Mongols Motorcycle Club, a powerhouse with chapters in 14 states and multiple countries.
I really liked it at first. There was a lot of younger guys that were, like I said, we talked earlier, into punk rock, skateboarding, and it kind of was more my feel of things just because, like you said, I jumped right into things without really knowing what I'm getting into. So on the surface level, it seemed great. The more I was in it, kind of saw how things were working and the inner workings of it. Nothing negative against them, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't a good fit. I knew some Mongols when I was living in Nevada, and we'd been staying in touch. And so when I moved back to Oregon, the Mongols had posted that they were starting a chapter in Oregon.
Have you ever felt that pull towards something greater even when comfort surrounds you? Danger lurked in the shadows of transition. The FBI delivered a chilling warning. There was a hit on Mooch's life. Think about that moment, standing at the crossroads of life and death, decision and consequence.
Did that create a conflict with the Vagos and the Mongols, or?
Yeah.
It did?
Yeah, it was a little rough for a
Okay.
little bit. That was the first time ever, I think, an FBI agent came to my mom's house and said that they had information that there was a hit out on my life, and that was the first time something like that's happened to me, and it was so surreal.
Yet Mooch pressed forward, his determination unwavering. Leadership flowed through his veins. Starting in Eugene, Oregon, Mooch began building the Mongols empire.
The first chapter we started in Eugene was in Eugene, Oregon, 2007. And everyone the positions are elected. So I was elected president. But yeah, I mean, if you're the active, outgoing guy that's like putting it together and bringing the guys in, probably a good chance that you're going to get elected the president, right?
Portland fell next, then Northern California. By 2010, his influence had reached across state lines into Washington and even stretched across oceans to Australia.
I built not only a good support network, but a lot of chapters. Like I started most of the chapters in Oregon and Washington. I moved to the Midwest. I started like 4 different states. I started chapters there.
Under Mooch's guidance, more than 10 chapters sprouted across the Midwest and Pacific Northwest by 2015.
Chapters there. I helped start the Australian chapter of the Mongols, and that was all through connections and networking and people I'd stayed in touch with over the years. Some from touring and, some from just people I meet on the road or whatever.
Each new chapter represented not just expansion, but evolution. The Mongols weren't just growing, they were transforming. Consider the structure: a constitution, bylaws, commandments. Mooch didn't just follow rules, he enhanced them.
The Mongols have a bylaws and a constitution, so the chapter sometimes has their individual rules and then the national rules, which is the constitution. Once I came into leadership, I had a rule for all the regions that I oversaw that every member had to at least work out 3 days a week. Now, whether that was lifting weights, doing martial arts, everyone had to train and be proficient in something. To stay active for one reason, to spend positive time with each other was another reason, but also to stay skilled and ready.
His innovation? A regional representative system that revolutionized chapter oversight across different states.
So like everyone had to be at the weekly meetings and everyone had to pay their chapter dues. There was a national rule that no one could sell drugs within the club. In my regions, you weren't allowed to use methamphetamines. You couldn't ever do something that would put a member in jeopardy of getting arrested or in trouble.
Success carries weight. The constant pressure of rivalries, law enforcement scrutiny, and leadership responsibilities began to press down on Mooch's shoulders. But isn't that the price of greatness? For now, the pressure only fueled his drive. Every empire has its limits. Deep in his heart, Mooch knew this truth, but in 2015, standing at the height of his influence, those limits seemed distant as highway horizons. The question wasn't if change would come, it was when. Hey brothers, tired of YouTube's BS and censorship? It's time to break free. That's why I've shifted gears to Patreon, where I can bring you the raw, uncensored content you crave. Join my Patreon crew and get an insane package deal. Exclusive early access to all videos, days before YouTube, 100% ad-free viewing experience. Uncensored, no-holds-barred community discussions, double the content. 2 killer videos every single week, VIP access. Direct interaction with yours truly, inside scoop, exclusive biker world updates you won't find anywhere else. Ready to join the elite? Hit that Patreon link now. Your support doesn't just keep us rolling, it fuels a revolution of uncensored, unrestricted content. Join now and unlock a world of exclusive benefits. Spotlight burns. By the mid-2010s, Justin Mooch's name echoed through the corridors of both outlaw biker culture and law enforcement offices.
Numerous times, because we had some informants in the chapter, which I didn't know about at the time, and so they were telling on me. So every time I got caught, I'd go back for a month or 2 at a time.
Leadership in the Mongols meant more than respect. It meant scrutiny. How do you measure success against survival? In 2008, federal raids had decimated the Mongols' ranks. Yet Mooch continued building.
So I was in during Operation Black Rain, which concluded in 2008, which was when four ATF agents infiltrated the Mongols. 3 of them became full patch members, and dozens of informants. And it was this huge, I think it was the biggest national bust of motorcycle clubs ever.
Think about the pressure. Establishing chapters in Illinois, Missouri, and beyond, all while dodging the watchful eyes of authorities. Territory means tension. Each new chapter brought conflict with established clubs like the Outlaws, particularly in St. Louis.
The main issue with the Outlaws came when I started a chapter in Illinois. When I moved to Illinois, I told them I had no interest in starting chapters there, because I didn't. But things happened, more people became interested. I started chapters in their areas and they thought I was their friend, and it looked like I had gone behind their back. And apparently some outlaws had said, yeah, we're going to get Mooch next, or they had said something like that to an informant. And so when the times that law enforcement was notified, they had a duty to warn and protect, so they had to tell me about it.
Yet Mooch's diplomatic touch turned potential warfare into uneasy peace. By 2017, His blueprint had created 3 chapters in Missouri, 2 in Illinois, and 3 more in Indiana. Numbers that spoke of ambition realized. Balance became a daily struggle. Picture this: a high-ranking Mongol by night, a social worker with a degree from Whittier College by day.
I was 29. Yeah, I was 36 when I finally graduated with a master's degree. So I was about 28 when I started going to school. And then, I just kept going. I started with that drug and alcohol counseling and fell in love with psychology. And then I ended up getting a master's degree in social work.
How many lives can one man lead? For Mooch, the answer was always one more than yesterday. Time takes its toll. Looking around, Mooch saw the pattern. Top leaders either dead, imprisoned, or exiled. The statistics weren't just numbers. They were warnings written in fate. Legal storms gathered. In 2018, the Mongols faced a landmark case threatening their very identity, their patch. For a club built on symbols and brotherhood, what remains when those symbols face extinction? Questions haunted quiet moments.
And in fact, it was a case that just ended like last year, because at one of it, they tried to legally take the club's patch in a civil forfeiture. And of course, that went up the ladder to, Supreme Court and stuff like that. So it was the whole time I was in the club, we were fighting this case.
How long could this balance last? When does ambition become an appetite for destruction? Success in the Mongols came with a price tag written in years, freedom and peace of mind. Loyalty never wavered. Yet beneath that steadfast surface, change stirred like thunder before storm. The man who had built empires now pondered building bridges to a different future. But timing, as always, would prove everything. Pressure builds. By 2019, Justin Mooch felt the weight of his choices pressing down like gravity.
There was a lot of internal power struggling going on to who was going to replace him. They started changing some of the rules or some of the protocols that I had in place. I started feeling like I was being targeted because of the fact that there was a lot of out-of-state representatives that were suggesting maybe I run for national president. So there was a lot of politics involved.
A decade of leadership in the Mongols had left its mark. What's the price of an empire? In Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, Mooch's chapters stood as monuments to his vision. But expansion meant enemies. The outlaws, the highwaymen, and countless others watched and waited for weakness. Consider the mathematics of survival. Every phone call monitored, every ride tracked, every move analyzed by law enforcement. How long can anyone dance on the razor's edge? For Mooch, the answer began taking shape in unexpected ways. Life has its own momentum. After earning his degree from Whittier College, Mooch's work as a social worker opened new horizons. Strange parallels emerged between managing troubled lives and leading outlaw bikers. Both required understanding, patience, and respect. By 2020, the Crossroads loomed. The Mongols fought legal battles that threatened their very identity, while Mooch fought internal battles about his future.
And then just recently, they were charged with racketeering and murder native racketeering.
One of the close members that I'd brought into the club recently was murdered. Another guy that I was friends with in another club just got murdered. This was all like in a couple months. So there's this power vacuum going on. I'm burnt out. Two close friends of mine just get killed. Now I've got law enforcement saying I might get killed. And it started getting to the point that I was like, man, I didn't align with the morals and values of this new leadership. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think the club seemed happy.
14 years of brotherhood weighed against an uncertain tomorrow.
Relationship was failing, and it got to the point where I wasn't really believing it anymore, so I didn't want to be half in.
Decisions demand courage. Think about walking away from everything you've built, everything you've known. In 2022, Mooch made that walk, retiring from the Mongols with respect intact but future uncertain.
The club in 2022.
Change comes in waves. First the doubt, then the decision, finally the departure. Each step carried its own weight, its own consequences.
And so I initially chose to retire, and then my status later got changed out bad. The status of out in bad standings initially back in the day was if you broke one of those major rules, you stole somebody's money or a member's money, or you told on someone, not only were there no contact, but generally they wouldn't be welcome around the group and you likely could get beat up. Nowadays that it's used as more a political stance, it's just more of a no contact order. So active members are no longer allowed to talk to anyone that's out in bad standing.
But isn't that the nature of transformation? Freedom has many faces. For Mooch, it meant writing his own story, one no longer defined by patches or territories.
I have a lot of other club tattoos, but when I retired from the club, I chose to cover them up. I didn't want to represent something that I was no longer in.
The question wasn't whether he could survive outside the club. It was how high he could soar. Words carry power. In 2022, Justin Mooch began translating his experiences into something new: narrative. Freedom from the Mongols meant freedom to speak. Have you ever wondered about the stories that shaped your life? For Mooch, those stories filled pages. In early 2023, The Ride of My Life hit shelves, offering readers an unflinching look at his journey from punk rocker to Mongol leader. His success followed authenticity. Podcast invitations flooded in, speaking engagements multiplied, and collaboration offers piled up. Each platform offered Mooch a chance to share his truth while respecting the brotherhood he'd left behind.
And since then, things, not in saying anything bad about the club or whatever, but my life's been really positive. Things have been moving forward. There's nothing really holding me back from doing what I want to do, and it's been a blessing. It's been really cool.
Balance required wisdom. How much could he reveal? Where did loyalty end and truth begin? Mooch walked this line with careful steps, never betraying confidences while sharing his personal growth. Savannah, Georgia became home. With his wife by his side, Mooch built a life far from the chaos of his past. Yet the edge remained. You can take the man out of the outlaw life. But can you take the outlaw life out of the man? Speaking engagements reached thousands, podcast listeners multiplied, and his influence grew. But statistics meant less than impact. Each life touched, each story shared, each lesson learned meant more than any metric. Transformation never ends. By late 2023, Mooch's narrative had evolved from rebellion to redemption. Yet every ending sparked new beginnings. What stories remain untold? Think about legacy. Not the kind written in patches or territory, but in lives changed and wisdom shared. For Mooch, this became the new measure of success. Purpose evolves. In 2024, Justin Mooch stood as living proof that transformation never stops. His focus shifted from leading outlaws to guiding lost souls. What makes a legacy meaningful? Through his work as a social worker, Mooch connected with countless individuals seeking direction.
When you started it, and I'm not even going to call it a motorcycle club, I call it more of a movement, lift, train, ride,
Yeah.
LTR. And it seems like you still can get the brotherhood, the camaraderie, the like-minded people you want around you without all the bullshit that goes around with.
His experience as a leader in the Mongols transformed into tools for positive change.
Life's kind of just learning as you go, right? And then learning from those mistakes and not making them twice. So what we did with Lift, Train, Ride was a lot of what we liked from the motorcycle club world and from that scene, and leaving behind what we didn't. And we had, because we're just a small group of guys, we have that freedom that we could do that.
Consider the impact. Partnerships with local organizations in Georgia, development of support networks for veterans and former gang members, creation of programs combining counseling with job training.
As the 1%er community reacted to the LTR movement?
I think it's been pretty positive for the most part from what I've heard. We're not wearing patches really. We're not claiming areas. It's definitely not about, territory or anything else. It's just a group of guys, like you said, holding each other accountable and trying to make them be the best version of themselves they can be. So it's holding each other accountable to positive stuff. So I don't think, outside of maybe seeing each other on events, there's not a lot of overlap. We don't go to the same types of bars they go to. We just really don't see them out and about.
Each initiative carried the lessons of brotherhood learned in the outlaw world. Creativity found new channels. His podcast featured diverse voices, musicians, former bikers, community leaders, all sharing stories of change. Think about the reach. Thousands of listeners, countless lives touched, infinite possibilities for connection. Documentary collaboration followed. The project explored the intersection of punk rock and outlaw biker culture, earning critical acclaim for its raw honesty. How many lives mirror these journeys, from rebellion to belonging? Numbers paint pictures. Hundreds of mentoring sessions, dozens of speaking engagements, countless lives impacted. But statistics can't capture the depth of transformation, both his own and those he helped. Savannah's pace suited him now. Evening rides along Georgia's highways replaced the adrenaline of outlaw life. Yet the fire remained, channeled into creation rather than destruction. Evolution never ceases. Justin Mooch's story isn't about redemption. It's about growth, about using the past to build the future. And somewhere on Georgia's roads, that future continues to unfold, 1 mile at a time.